Good evening, everybody, and I'll echo Ed's appreciation for everybody coming from various locations tonight, as far as Hawaii. Overnight, I've had some folks from San Diego and some local folks too. So I think we have a nice program for you with a variety of speakers that are going to give you some information that I hope you will share with your friends and neighbors, and realize that as nice as it is to do the things that a lot of you people are involved in, you need some money to do it, and it's got to pay off in the long run, or it most likely isn't going to get done. I've got a little brief introduction on it because our speakers want to get right to the information that they have. But what we're going to focus on, obviously, is going green in real estate. And I think if I were to sum something up in a brief analysis, I would call it that it's a work in progress. It's a very exciting, positive work, one that's progressing forward, but one that still has a lot of obstacles to overcome and a lot of challenges, especially coming out of the real estate market that's been terrible, as all you guys know, for the last several years. I'm just going to touch on a couple of numbers that indicate value without going into any theory, because I'd rather get into the practical applications. And our speakers are going to show you where the money is, how to get it, the value of the property once the available funds from these programs are utilized to enhance the property operations, and ultimately the economic return. As I mentioned earlier, needless to say, the past few years have been a very difficult time to accurately assess any real estate transaction. Investing additional capital into most properties, no matter what the payback or ROI structure, has not been the number one priority for property owners over the last several years. Most of them were just hopeful to save their properties. But the markets are starting to show signs of life. Some areas are even robust again. Areas that were downtrodden, Phoenix, Vegas, are starting to show tremendous activity. Commercial properties starting to show some life again. Industrial always has been pretty solid. But just a couple of quick numbers that I want to share with you that I got from surveys that have been done show that basically for commercial properties, they have higher rents. Green labeled properties have higher rents in the 2 to 6% range. They have higher effective rents in the 6 to 8% range, and higher disposition values in 11 to 13%. So I said some of these numbers are hard to justify from market to market, but generally we're showing that there is value there for projects that undertake these kinds of environmental enhancements. For California residential properties, which we won't talk about a whole lot tonight, but there was a study that was performed by a couple of economists from UC Berkeley and from UCLA, and they found that homes that were labeled Energy Star, Lead for Homes, and Green Point sold for approximately 9% more than comparable non-labeled homes. And for example, a $400,000 house in California, you could expect a value in excess of $34,000 on premium if you had one of these green labeled homes. That's kind of the positive side. So despite some of the positive findings, the consensus from a number of studies is that the real estate sector needs a robust, reliable metrics to measure the sustainability of properties and portfolios, to ensure regulatory compliance, drive organizations to create achievement, raise industrial accountability, and ultimately to gauge the credibility and genuine financial returns of environmental enhancement projects. And there are a few notable organizations that are currently undertaking the challenge to develop the required metrics, such as Greenpoint Foundation, Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, and the Green Property Alliance. And fortunately, some of the companies that we have as speakers in our program tonight. So with that little overview from me, I'd like to introduce the four speakers that we have on the program in the order that they are going to present. But the first The person I'd like to introduce is Bob Davis. And Bob, you can join us. Bob, he joined, he's a senior vice president with NII Capital's Newport Beach office. He joined them in March of 2012 after spending 8 years with Grubb & Ellis and 25 years with CBRE. He has comprehensive experience in all phases of office development, from land acquisition, lease-up, and investment sales, encompassing more than 2,300 transactions with a value exceeding $1.6 billion. So Bob's been pretty active over the years. His current focus is the sale and leasing of office properties in Orange County and tenant representation. Bob has also taken the lead in the formation of a preferred provider agreement between NAI and Windscape USA. A couple of the Windscape guys are here with us tonight, thank you, to address required energy benchmarking and building efficiency retrofits for California commercial property owners pursuant to AB 1103. Bob is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy with a BS in Analytical Management. He served aboard a fast attack nuclear submarine. Sounds like a great training for a broker to have. And when he was stationed in San Diego, he's an active participant in local civic organizations, past president of the Corona Del Mar Kiwanis Club. So Bob will be making our first presentation. Our second presentation will be with Jessica, made by Jessica Feingold. Jessica's right here. She is with the San Francisco office of the Environmental Defense Fund, and she's their financial policy fellow, and also by way of Honolulu, Hawaii, overnight to LAX, to Orange County, to here, to back to LAX, to back to San Francisco, and then to New York. Okay, I got that. So she has said if she falls asleep during her presentation, it will be expunged from the video, so don't hold her responsible for that. Jessica is focused on creating markets to finance energy efficiency and renewable generation projects. She has been working on the organization's Bill Repayment Program, which is an exciting development that she's going to be focusing on this evening, and implementing the program in a number of states. She has spent the majority of her career in finance, first as a trader for Goldman Sachs, and trading fixed income as vice president at Fortress Investment Group. This next part goes on for a while. Jessica received her MBA and MEM, is a Master's in Environmental Management from Yale. While in graduate school, she interned at EDF and Goldman Sachs in their Clean Tech and Renewables Investment Banking Group. Jessica has a BA in Mathematics, modified with Economics, and minored in Biology at Dartmouth. Almost exactly my educational resume. It's really kind of amazing. So Jessica will be presenting after Bob. Our next speaker will be Rebecca Sliner. Okay. Rebecca is a 15-year veteran of the gas and electric industry. She specializes in energy efficiency and demand response products and programs. She's been a guest speaker at webinars and workshops on retail energy, demand response, energy efficiency, and storage. As the Vice President of Energy Services at Melrock, Rebecca assists in the design and implementation of sales strategies with a focus on bringing energy stream and energy score solutions to consumers, assisting them in reducing their energy usage, costs, and carbon footprint. She currently manages Melrock's participation in the Demand Response Partnership Program with the USGBC. Rebecca holds degrees from Indiana and California State Universities. All these educated people. Our final speaker, and one that I'm looking forward to hearing from much too, is Mark Arvik. He's the Managing Director of Samus Capital, located here in Irvine. He has more than 20 years' experience on the buy, sell, and consulting sides of the residential mortgage-backed securities market. He's going to be explaining the PACE program to us this evening, a program that I was somewhat familiar with, but one that kind of seems to go back and forth. but he has some exciting developments to share with us today on a financial source there. His expertise was largely in structuring transactions on behalf of prime and alt-A issuers with over $100 billion of residential and multifamily mortgages issued into the capital market in over 70 transactions. In these capacities, he has been involved with pricing, legal, accounting, underwriting, and agency rating facets of deal issuance. As I mentioned, Mark is also the director of the company's PACE Financing, which stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy platform. That is the program he will focus on tonight. Mark attended the University of South Carolina and the University of Minnesota, earning a Bachelor of Science degree in Economics and a Bachelor of Arts degree in International Relations with a minor in Japanese, which we were discussing a little bit with my association with Mitsui Fudosan in the years past. He also holds a Master of Science degree in Economics with international emphasis. So, a pretty impressive group of speakers, one that I'm going to stop talking about and let them get to their presentations. So, thank you, and Bob, you can start us off. Thank you.
It's not easy to be green. I find that that's just as true today as it was some 30-odd years ago when Kermit the Frog first said those words. I got an email about 9 months ago from the CEO of our company, NEI Capital, saying AB 1103 is on its way. The Building Energy Efficiency Law is going to impact most commercial buildings here in the new year, and you guys ought to learn a little bit about it. And I sort of took that to heart and said, you know, this could be a game changer for our industry. And I'm always looking for an opportunity to provide value-add service to my clients. And so I started investigating. I started talking to accountants and CPAs and lawyers. And for the most part, no one had ever even heard of the law. And then I stumbled across a group, Windscape USA, was referred to them, and they had been active in the green building industry for some time, and had recently gotten active in the building energy efficiency area with several proprietary products. And in talking to them, we both thought that potentially this new legislation could be a game changer, and we ought to find out as much as we could about it and start talking to the NEI Capital offices here in Southern California, of which there are 14. And so we started down that path. And we started talking before the law was actually passed, which was codified on December 17th of 2012. The law had been passed several years prior to that. It was supposed to be enacted January 1. It got pushed back, like most things that cost money. It got pushed back, and as we started talking to people, the immediate reaction from most of the brokers was pretty negative, pretty confrontational. Hey, this is just one more set of regulations that's going to force companies out of the state of California. This is not a good thing. And we started backtracking, and then when the law finally got codified, some of the things that we thought were going to happen, in fact, didn't happen, and the law sort of got watered down a little bit at the last minute. But it still is a step in the right direction, I think. And we learned a lot, and so I've sort of had a cram course in building energy efficiency here over the last 9 months, much of it self-taught. So I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm light years ahead of most brokers. So this law is moving forward. It's going to impact non-residential buildings here in the state of California starting July 1, and it's all based on a federal mandate. There are other states that have similar laws into effect. California is still on the forefront, but it's on the forefront because it needs to be. There are certain exclusions to the laws, as you might guess, the hospital, nursing homes, jails, prison, etc. And surprisingly, multifamily was excluded in the state of California, but municipalities are going to decide how they want to enforce the law on a local basis. And the municipalities cannot water the law down, but they can make it more stringent than it is. And San Francisco was an early adopter of the law because they've got significant energy problems because of the density. And for them, they do include multifamily in the law. And I won't be surprised if several other cities here in California throughout the state include multifamily also. I know that Pasadena and Newport Beach are going to be pretty strict, and there'll probably be other cities that will follow suit as time goes by. What disclosure is required whenever a building is sold, refinanced, or leased in its entirety? The building owner has to provide a benchmarking disclosure. And that disclosure has to be provided within 24 hours prior, no later than 24 hours prior to the execution of the sale contract or the lease contract or the submittal of a loan application. And I've reviewed some legal opinions, and there are certain aspects of the law that are pretty ambiguous. The other aspect of this is that the report expires after 30 days. For those of you that have been involved in real estate transactions, they can drag on. So there's really no direction in the law as to how that gets handled. So there's a number of areas of this law that as time goes by will get sorted out. The timeline. Starting July 1st of this year, buildings of 50,000 square feet or more that are sold, refinanced, or leased in their entirety, you have to provide the benchmarking disclosure. 6 months later, that drops down to 10,000 square feet. Another 6 months later, it drops down to 5,000 square feet. So it covers nearly every commercial property in the state within the next 12 months. And what exactly is this benchmarking? It's part of the EPA's Energy Star Portfolio Manager software program. And what it is today and what it's going to be as July 1st could be different. I started working with Windscape in this area around the first of the year, and the software program has continually been changed. And in fact, they're going to shut the program down for the first 2 weeks in June for another major overhaul. So even reports that that we have done here in the last few months, it wouldn't surprise me if the result, if we did that report again 6 months from now, if it would be totally different. So it's an ongoing process that I think, over time it will evolve. The process takes about 30 days. You have to gather all the information, which includes 12 months of utility bills, the legal vesting of the ownership entity, the last 4 digits of the tax ID number. I'll get back to that. And then put it into the software program. And then surprisingly, it takes about 2 weeks to get a response from the system. So for those property owners that are planning to do something in early July, it could be difficult because of the time involved just to get this done. So there's going to be a big learning curve here, I think, as this gets implemented the 1st of July. The buildings are rated on a scale of 0 to 100, 100 being in the specific category, and there are about 16 different categories of buildings. And within your category, you're rated. 100 being you're in the 100 percentile of in comparison to the other buildings. We have been told that a rating of 75 is borderline, and that eventually, as time goes by, that if you score less than 75, you will be required to make modifications to improve your building energy efficiency. Although there's no methodology for that today. And what we like to say is voluntary to mandatory. We think it's going to be much like ADA, which started out voluntary, many years ago, and then as time went by, they started putting some teeth into the requirements to meet the requirements of the legislation and the costs associated with that. And we think that's going to be the case with this new law. Broker's perspective. as I mentioned earlier, the broker's initial reaction was pretty negative. I think in part that was because we weren't doing a very good job of presenting the law in a positive light relative to current economic conditions, which have been pretty tough. I think we're through the worst of the economic downturn, and we're moving in the right direction. And so what I've been telling property owners here recently is now is the time to invest. Rental rates are going to be going up for the next 3 to plus years, and so now is the time to invest in energy efficiency items that are going to increase your net operating income over time. In a lot of stuff you see, it's since I've started following this field, every week or so there's an article in the Wall Street Journal or some other publication saying that, solar doesn't work, it's very expensive, it's the payback's forever, nuclear power is the way to go, but then, a lot of, nuclear power has its inherent problems also. So there's different factions out there that are competing for our hearts and green money, and so I'm not sure that we get a really unbiased opinion of what the alternatives are, and of course the alternatives are changing daily with the technology that's rapidly evolving in our country. But from my perspective as a broker, I say let's keep it simple. It's kind of hard to. Ray was quoting some figures earlier, but it's kind of hard to look at it because most of the lead buildings and the buildings that are energy efficient are the newer buildings. They are the better buildings. Well, they are going to get better rents. So it's really hard to differentiate, the green component versus the balance of the building. So I like to keep it simple and say, look at how you're reducing your operating expenses. That's a bottom line. It goes, you're going to capitalize that to create value when you sell the property or refinance it. So I think you need to focus on something that's real simple to understand. So I would like to see moving forward that we focus on decreasing the operating expenses, and then, okay, I'm investing X amount of dollars. How soon do I get my money back? Is it 10 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 12 months? So that's where I would like to see the focus moving forward. I think in talking to brokers here over the last 6 months, I'm starting to see that brokers understand the issues that we're facing, and the reality is this is a map of the grid in California, but what I would point out is there's only a few access points into the state. If you look at the grid of the entire United States, on the west of the Mississippi, you can barely see anything but grid lines running to and fro. But when you get out here on the West Coast, it's pretty thin. And for those of you that were around in 2011 when somebody threw the wrong switch in Arizona, we were shut down for a while, for 6+ hours, with no power from South Orange County into San Diego. So, I think we are really quite vulnerable, and I think, part of the problem is that the government hasn't been talking about it. I think perhaps they're afraid to talk about it because we are really so very vulnerable with respect to how our electrical grid works, the age of the electrical grid, and the capacity. Across the United States, I think we've got about a 3% margin for error. California is about 1%. So if we don't do something in terms of conserving energy, there's not going to be a whole lot of growth. And the flip side of that is, okay, well, let's build some new power plants. Well, I don't think that's going to happen. Even if everybody decided that it was a good idea to build a new power plant, it would be 10 years before it was up and running. And for those of you that are local here, San Onofre is running at about 30% capacity right now. It may never be back to 100% capacity. Diablo Canyon up in Northern California is not going to get its license renewed. So, instead of adding power generators, we're taking them away. So we do have a significant issue here, and I think that as time goes by, we'll all get a little more focused on it. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to talk to you tonight about an initiative that Environmental Defense Fund is really prioritized in the last couple of years called on-bill repayment. And first, I'm going to sort of set the stage for why we're talking about this, and also sort of a disclaimer that financing in the non-residential space is different than in the residential space for many reasons, but it's not the silver bullet. We don't think you're going to have this financing program and policymakers and policy wonks are going to throw it over and everyone here is going to say, great, that works or doesn't work, So we think this is a program we're working on. We're working with industry. We're working with banks, with other capital sources, with property owners. So to the extent this is interesting to you, this is sort of really relevant in the state of California, and I'll get into the process and the progress that we're making on-bill repayment. But I would love to speak with anyone either tonight or I have to catch a flight. But at the end, I'll share my contact information. So why are we talking about non-residential or commercial energy efficiency? And just to get sort of a sense of this, building energy efficiency, the built environment in the United States produces about 40% of emissions. About half of those are residential and about half of those are non-residential. And access to capital has been cited in numerous studies as the number one barrier to pursuing some of these projects that would help mostly companies save money. Most of these projects will be cost-saving projects, but it's either that they don't have access to financing or that they have some competing demand for that capital, that they believe there's a higher rate of return that's more closely associated with the core competency of that company that's diverting cash flow, and this is not the focus for that company. We have programs in the state of California that provide capital to small businesses at 0% interest, and the utilities offer these programs. We call them at Environmental Defense Fund, and sort of, I don't know, the small circles that we influence, OBF for on-bill financing versus OBR, which is what we're calling on-bill repayment. And OBF is ratepayer-funded loans for energy efficiency for small businesses. And the investor-owned utilities in California offer these programs, but they're very prescriptive in what they can offer. There's maximum loan amounts, there's certain measures that you can pursue, and they also are very limited, right? Ratepayer funds are not able to scale to meet the size of this opportunity. And they're oversubscribed, and customers have to wait a really long time to get an answer whether or not they're approved, and then the contractor's like, I moved on to the next thing, and we think about going in to get a car loan, and they're like, I'll call you next week and let you know what your monthly payment's going to be. No one buys a car. So it's like there's a demand issue here in addition to a financing issue, and how we approach customers and make a contractor-centric program. So now I'll actually tell you what the program we're talking about is. Our proposal, and I'll get to sort of later on where we're making some significant progress, is that private capital needs to step up and really be part of the solution to this problem for energy efficiency and for renewable energy. And part of what makes this program unique and innovative is that it's really underwriting the occupancy of a building. So it's a financing to a property owner at no upfront cost that allows them to repay that financing over time on their utility bill, and that obligation stays with the meter and that property. So and this is really important for a number of reasons. I was talking earlier this evening with a few folks about the ability to survive foreclosure. And so why wouldn't I just go get a loan or put it on my credit card at 15%? Why do I think that I might get a better rate if I have a loan that's attached to my meter? Well, if I don't pay, it's treated like I didn't pay my electricity bill. And most businesses or commercial properties and residential properties for that matter, the utility bill is often the number one sort of prioritized payment for that business or household. So that's a huge stick, right, for for customers to actually repay the financing is that it's treated like their commodity charges right now on their utility bill. And number two, that the meter is really the form of security. So if I leave or there's a change in ownership or occupancy of a property, not only does that obligation transfer to the next owner or occupant with proper disclosure, but it also would survive foreclosure because it automatically transfers. The next customer turns on their utility account. This is part of the obligation. Those are the basic tenets of how it works. Some of the things that we're really advocating for are that OBR is a network or a platform, that it's not a program. We're not saying, Citibank, can you offer 10-year loans at 7% to anyone who wants them? Like, that's what we have already, right? We have 20 states offering small programs that from maybe mission-driven sources of capital or federal funds that cannot scale and don't actually allow the market to do what they do. So don't allow the private sector to say, this person needs lights and this guy needs a new HVAC system and windows would really help over here. And without being overly prescriptive, we want to let, within the realm of energy-related improvements, let people do what they want to do and allow all this will do is change the repayment mechanism to what we would think is a more secure form of repayment. Kind of touched on a bunch of these things already, and I'm happy to go into any of them more in discussion. I don't want to bore you reading my slides. So I kind of touched on this too, but flexibility we think is very important. Not trying to throw a program over the fence and say, make it work, but work with, with banks that are already really excited about offering financing to some of these participants, but give them a way to actually enhance the credit of those financings in a really meaningful way. And why is this great? Because there's no direct cost to taxpayers or ratepayers. So this is something we talk about in California and Texas, in Hawaii and Ohio. I mean, this appeals to both sides of the aisle, right? Because this is not just I live in San Francisco and I want to save the world program. This is actually something that I'm talking about. We're talking to people across the country that has broad and really widespread appeal. We talk about jobs. We'd like this to ultimately create lower cost capital to consumers. So right now, maybe you can borrow, but does this change the equation by 200 basis points for a property owner? I mean, the ultimate goal is that not only does it expand access, but it lowers the cost. And we touched on this just a minute ago, but for ratepayers, ultimately, avoiding cost of new generation. For utilities, we want to make the business case for utilities as to why this makes sense. Why does the utility bill want to be the collection agent for another financing entity? They have their own programs that I discussed that really the conclusion is these don't scale. And the Public Utilities Commission in California has very specifically asked the utilities to come back with proposals for how they can think about financing programs that do not rely on ratepayer funds. And so it's really, if the utilities can get credit for these programs and these projects and say, we have enabled this much energy savings, and that counts towards the RPS and other things that utilities care about, and we make this, a fee-based business for them. So, the lender's saving a stamp, mailing out a bill every month from a direct loan, maybe there's a marginal cost that they pay the utility something small to make it, so that there's sort of a level playing field, and we're not just asking the utilities to do a service at no return for them. So why should you care? In May of 2012, the California Public Utilities Commission did issue a decision requiring the state's investor-owned utilities to offer on-bill repayment for commercial properties. So now we are 13 months later, in almost June of 2013, waiting for the final decision from the PUC. But there's been a lot of back and forth, and we're hoping that we'll see something in the next few weeks from them. But what this means is, once there's a decision, 3 or 4 months later, we expect implementation of the program to begin, meaning that non-residential properties in California would be eligible to utilize this program, which we think will really be a game changer for them. And we're also working to expand this program to residential properties in California and across the country in some other states. And just so you're aware, organizations from big real estate developers, property owners, solar companies, nonprofits, multifamily housing advocates are among our supporters. So the apartment association, the real estate association, we've worked really hard with a strong group and a really diverse coalition of stakeholders on our on-bill repayment program. So I urge you, if you're tangentially related to any of those groups and you'd want to talk about this more, I'd like to have the discussion with you. What we're seeing in California is significant interest from a number of players. I mentioned some of these different players earlier, but like I said, the flexibility allows different kinds of financing structures. So whether it's a loan, a lease, a PPA, or an energy service agreement, we want all of those to be able to be eligible for the on-bill repayment program. Where else are we working? In Ohio, we're working on legislation. I just came back from Hawaii this morning, where the PUC has mandated an on-bill repayment program for residential and small commercial properties, which is particularly important in Hawaii, where there's the highest utility electric rates in the country that have grown the fastest in the last 10 years of any other state, where there's huge solar potential, and they rely in a vast majority of their energy from imported petroleum. So not only is there a big carbon footprint, but it's really expensive. And so if we can prove some of these concepts in Hawaii, I think that where you can achieve what's called bill neutrality a lot easier, right? You can, your utility bill might go down by X, and then your financing payment is Y. And then the goal is that, your new utility bill plus Y is still less than what your old bill was. So the goal is that your bills net don't actually go up, or ideally they go down. Also talking with stakeholders in Texas and North Carolina, and those are probably a little bit further in like the 2015 sort of guideline area, but we're right now 2013 is Ohio, Hawaii, and California. Like I said, I'd love to talk with you. I work with a guy named Brad Copperthorne, who I think some of you may have met with or heard speak in the past. And we think this is really exciting, what's happening in California. I actually wrote a blog about the home values going up 9% after that paper was published. So if you want to read it, you can go to edf.org/energy/OBR. And we kind of talk about a lot of different financing in clean energy things, not just on bill repayment. But thank you.
Jessica? No, we have Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Slannert. I'm with Melrock, and as everyone else who's been talking has sort of pointed out, this is all about the money. I'm coming in from a little different perspective, in that the money's actually in the building, and how do you get more for your buck? So reducing energy use reduces your carbon footprint, but it also reduces your costs. There's several steps here that we think are valuable and not as complicated as they may appear. One of them was sort of touched on earlier, as far as getting an assessment of your energy usage. One of those assessments is an Energy Star rating. We also have a system that we feel is a little bit more comprehensive, but there are others out there. The key here is that you want to look at the existing energy usage in buildings, not just the electricity, but electricity and gas. So you can identify places where perhaps there is money sitting there that you can get. So, for example, we've done this for several customers, and one of them we realized that they were actually spending 60% of their energy costs on nights and weekends, but they were only open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. That's a problem. But you don't necessarily know that unless you really know how to look at it. Another one we found was they had an interesting situation where they had energy usage. Their HVAC system was coming on at 3 in the morning. Well, there wasn't anyone in the building at 3 in the morning. That's lovely that it would be nice and chilly by the time everyone got in every day, but kind of a waste of energy and money. Of course, the building automation system guy said, well, our system is working perfectly fine. It sends the signal and tells it to turn off. The HVAC guy said, well, our system's working fine. The HVAC unit is working perfectly well. Well, that little receiver that got that signal from the HVAC system had burnt out. And without an energy audit of this type, and by the way, this is done without ever going into the building. We do it based on just the energy usage, the gas information, the hourly weather data, that's a key, and a little bit of information on work hours and space usage. But we were able to identify that for them, that, you know, it didn't matter that this guy said his system was working great and this guy said his system was working great. That little piece of equipment was not working at all. And once they fixed that, and it was a very minor change, then now their HVAC system does not come on at 3 in the morning. So by assessing the energy usage that as it currently is, you can locate some low-cost energy measures, the energy efficiency measures, such as changing set points, trying not to heat and cool at the same time. I will tell everyone here, as I say to everyone else I meet, I am the only non-engineer in our company, at least in the local office. And I was amazed to hear that one of those items there says something about eliminating simultaneously heating and cooling. How many people in this office realize that people do that all the time? Anybody? Yeah, okay. The guy from my office can't raise his hand. One of the reasons they do this is to remove humidity out of the air, which makes sense. You want to get that humidity out, especially on the coastal climates. So you're going to cool it and then heat it back up to a reasonable temperature. However, we identified another client who happened to be doing this. They would cool the air down to 50 degrees and then heat it back up every day to something where people could actually tolerate it. Well, that's great if you're going to remove humidity, but this was in a Inland Empire building in August. They don't have a whole lot of humidity out there, I don't think, in August. So there's a lot of things that you can do that are very low cost, no cost energy efficiency measures to get money out of your energy system. Obviously, the next one, and this is important, is evaluating demand response potential. I am going to touch on a demand response program that U.S. Green Building Council is hosting, and that's towards the end. But one of the things is you want to look at your usage. This is a daily usage from the 24 hours, so you can see the peaks in the middle of the day. You want to look at when the demand response window is, and ultimately you want to determine how much a customer can reduce their energy, and this can be done in a number of different ways. You also want to identify the best program. Depending on where you're located, there may be any number of them that would offer either payments, actual payments to you to be on standby to reduce your usage when the energy systems are taxed, or there are programs such as the Summer Advantage program. Is that right, Karen? In Southern California, Edison, that give you credits every month. And you want to have an implementation plan for a demand response. When we talk about demand response, we really like to encourage automated demand response, or at least semi-automated demand response. This does not mean that people lose total control of their building, and I'll pick on Edison because they're in the back of the room. Edison flips a switch and everything goes off. That's not how it works. I promise. Don't we promise, Karen? She doesn't pay me to say that. What it does mean is that the signals are automated, and if you don't do anything, things will happen. The things that happen are things you choose, or the building owner chooses, not someone else choosing for you. You determine how much you want to do, what different phases, there's lots of different options, and then you might turn off fountains or certain lights in hallways or set back your thermostat. But you make those choices. If you do nothing, those things happen. If you want to interrupt that and opt out that day, that's always an option. So, getting buy-in for demand response, always a fun project. One of the things we like to point out, this is where the money is. This is money that you already have, that you can keep. By getting, in some cases, payments for being on standby, similar to when you go to the airport and they've overbooked your flight. They're going to pay you to stay off the plane. This sort of is the same idea. If you are available to do this, whether they call you or not, you can get payments every month. And if you actually call an event and you participate, more money. There are others, like I said, where there are credits on your payment, on your bill every month if you're willing to reduce your usage during times of peak usage. There are also incentive programs to help pay for the equipment that's required, and there's opportunity for sustained benefit going forward. If you can reduce, say, 10 kW for an event, there's a possibility you may be able to reduce anywhere from 2 to 5 kW all the time in the middle of the day, and that's the most expensive power that you can possibly have. So if you can manage your peak load, which is what it's called, you can substantially save money. In one case, we had a client that was, it was 60% of their bill was the peak charges. So by making even a small change, that can make a huge difference in the cost. And then you can obviously use that to pay for any equipment that you need or do other things that you want to do. So, U.S. Green Building Council does recognize that this is an important event, so they have developed this demand response partnership program. I don't know how many of you were here. We did a luncheon, Karen and I, some time back, and Chris is back here too. He's, Chris, you want to kind of wave? Chris and Karen are both very active in this demand response partnership program, as is myself and others. These are some of the people that are involved, including EDF. And they have added some new members, I believe, recently. I know Nevada Energy's involved, and I believe there's another one coming in, local company that's coming in involved. Is that right? About to happen, so we can't say who that is. The goals of this program are outreach. They want an education. They want commercial buildings to understand that this is out there, that there's an advantage for them to participate. Yes, it's green. We all love that, but there's money involved, and this is a good thing. They also want, obviously, more and more adoption. Commercial buildings, I think there were several notices about how much energy the commercial buildings actually take. Demand response has been pretty popular with manufacturers and industrial groups for years, but the commercial buildings are very much underrepresented here. So there is an effort right now. I know Southern California Edison, Skipping Stone, who's representing U.S. Green Building Council out of Washington, D.C., are doing outreach to LEED certified buildings now. We are also doing this with our own customers. Here's some benefits. Obviously, there's a lot of hand-holding and assistance to get the credit. There's a lot of assistance to get any incentives if they're available to help you pick the program that's best for you. And then there's things like case studies and, some very nice publicity. Right now, it is a pilot credit. It is scheduled to be a real credit, for lack of a better word, with the V4 coming out later this year. I believe right now it's 3 credits for existing buildings and 2 for new constructions in areas that have a demand response program. If you are in a municipality and there is not a demand response program, an automated demand response program, you can still get credit. There's just a few other steps that you take, so you get everything ready to go, and then you write a nice letter to your municipality and say, please do this. Melrock is involved in this. We will help all of our customers, and if you have anybody who's interested, obviously we'd be happy to hand out cards. To evaluate your demand response potential, what is the best program? We will install an information system that not only does automated demand response, but all of these other things as well, and help with any incentive opportunities and demand response strategies. So who is Melrock? And it is Rock, not Bach. I think there's some small error on the name tag. We are a company that's about 5 years old. I'd like to say we're young. We're not a startup, but we're a young company. We are headquartered in Reno, Nevada. However, the brain power is all local in Orange County. And that's not me. That's all the other people in the office. We are working with a lot of different customers in the United States as well as overseas. What we do, we optimize customers' energy use through 2 of our products, Energy Stream and Energy Score. I like to say that we really are about the information, not the software, not the hardware, the information and what we can help buildings understand their usage. Energy Stream is a hardware-software package that will give you more detail than you could possibly want if you want to go there. We can tell you how everything in your building is working at every minute live. Energy Score is that stay away. We just do it from a distance. We don't involve the building itself. We look at data. We like to call it the triple play. We look at real-time monitoring and verification. We are involved with some of the new things that are coming up in California regarding energy efficiency for the schools. Prop 39, I believe. Real-time peak demand management, like I said, being able to save that really expensive energy, and automated demand response. Here are a couple of our customers that are local. We have a very big presence on the University of California, Irvine campus. We did one of their LEED certified platinum buildings and actually still found them some savings. We also are at the DMC building that is, we've saved them 24% on their energy, electricity, and 60% on their gas, and that's been sustained for 3 years. So if you'd like to know more, please let me know.
Hello, my name is Mark Arbig. I'm with Samas Capital. I'm here to talk about PACE financing. Just a heads up, I'm really bad about following my own slides, so I'll do the best I can. Came into the PACE world. My background was really in the issuer market and putting mortgages into the market. Years ago, I ran into a buddy of mine that did esoteric securitizations, who now is my current partner, who worked over in Europe, and he brought the PACE asset to my attention. He goes, have you seen this legislation? This is really interesting from an investor's point of view, purely from an investor's point of view. So we looked into it a little bit. We thought it was very, very interesting. Did a little bit of research, in the market as well as on the asset. Went out to some of our investors that we've been putting these mortgages into the market for years to, and just asked them, what do you think of this? I mean, purely from an investor's perspective, what do you think of this asset class? And bar none, everybody loved it, okay? Especially long duration investors. So insurance companies, pension funds, endowments, they love the asset class. So we said, okay, how do we get involved with this? So of course we went online, we found the first conference we could find on PACE, okay? And so we went to the conference and we were all excited and we were listening to all the guest speakers. And then they would all say, well, let me talk about our program. They talk all about their program. We're taking all kinds of notes. And at the end of the go, and then we finance it. And my friend, my colleague Jean-Claude and I were just staring at each other going, wow, we're late. Like they're already doing this, okay? So after all of these, all the speakers are done, we went up and started chatting with them and said, well, exactly how are you financing it? And then we found out that it was more like, well, we will finance it and people will come to this. So immediately we saw a problem with the industry. There was no financing. There was, the Field of Dreams approach, basically. So we said, wow, this is a great opportunity. It's a great asset class. It's a very interesting sector, and it's new and it's growing. Okay, so that's how we first got into the sector. So part of the PACE legislation was adopted in July of 2008. Okay. In California. Basically, PACE is it's a very simple concept. All it did is it took loans on renewable energy projects and turned them into a tax assessment. That's all it did. It's a very simple trick. It's a very clever trick. And from the investor's point of view, it's a marvelous trick. They love it, okay? And, in terms of what Jessica was talking about earlier, a lot of what she talked about, in terms of what the investors would like and how it follows the property, all these things apply to the PACE asset as well. So, we thought with that little trick, that was something that's interesting. We really got into the sector just to be a financing partner with programs. I'll be totally honest with you. But what ultimately ended up happening is we went to Riverside County. We're lucky enough to go to Riverside County, and we won their mandate, and we were kind of forced to set up an issuer platform or to set up a program as a third-party administrator. So, the good news is my partner's background is in finance. My background is in issuer platforms, so I was able to set up basically an issuer platform. Our solution is really, really simple. All we want to do is connect the consumer to the capital markets. That's all we want to do. It's a really simple exercise, but how we want to do it is we want to do it in the most efficient, most cost-effective way. And the most efficient, cost-effective way that I knew of doing this was not through the municipal market, which is what everybody was talking about in the beginning. This is going to be a revenue bond. This is going to be all these muni bonds. We said, no. We don't want it to be attached to the municipality. We want it to be separate from the municipality. And by doing this, by separating it from the municipality and bringing it to the investor community, which is my old community buying residential mortgages, it fit very, very nicely. What does that community want? Well, the good thing about that community is they have an immense amount of appetite 50% of the market in residential mortgage space went away with what they call ghost financing, which is, just means that it wasn't financed by Fannie and Freddie. So in the non-agency space, basically that space went away, okay? No originations in that space since, probably 2007. So the market out there has an appetite for these kind of products, these long duration products, and we thought, wouldn't it be interesting to set up an issuer platform just like we had back in those days, feed this product into the same investors that are starving for new assets, this is a fantastic asset, and they have very, very efficient pricing, extremely efficient pricing. So if this is a really nice asset class and it's a premium asset, investors want it, they'll bid the coupon down very hard. And over the long run, what that means to the consumer, it's very simple, is the consumer gets the benefit of lower rates. Okay, now this doesn't happen overnight, but we thought by setting up that platform, by getting the PACE asset, this PACE product rated by a rating agency, which we did, we basically mimicked that platform and created the efficiencies that we wanted, okay? And then the next step for us is a little more difficult, and it's providing it to a consumer in a very easy, simplistic way that they didn't have to think about a lot. Okay, so this is a tax assessment. It is put on your tax bill. It's a voluntary assessment. The PACE legislation started in California. It's currently now in 28 other states. Samas Capital is involved in the Hero Commercial Program within California. We're also in Florida. We won a mandate in Cleveland, Ohio, and surprisingly enough, we're in Texas and some other states that are common to some folks in the audience here. The program is spread out through the U.S. That's important to us because the legislation is largely the same, and really for us to make this work is we need volume. We need as much volume as we can possibly create. And so we're trying to spread ourselves into as many places as we can. So the benefits to the property owner is basically it's easy access to get it. There is no credit check. It really resides on the property. It's attached to your property. It's not attached to a person. So it follows your property. So back again to what was mentioned earlier, the good part about this is there's no real credit check. If there's a problem with you and you can't repay the bill, the biggest risk to the investor is a delay in cash flows and getting recouped in cash flows. That's it. And the next property owner will take over the tax assessment, so it follows the property. That's also very useful because, I told my mother about PACE. My mother is a diehard conservative who's not really hip to the renewable energy thing. And the first thing she said since she's 70 years old is, great, I put solar panels on my house and I die in 2 years, and I have to pay for these solar panels, And I'm like, no, Mom, that's not it. It follows the house and it's transferable. That's a very, very important piece of this. Because it's like that, what we have is we have something that has a very long duration. So if we put solar panels on your property, literally we can put, the terms of our loans are 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25 years. So we can literally put a 25-year loan on your house if the solar panels are warranted up to 25 years. So your amortization schedule is a lot longer. There's no bullets. It's not attached to you. So if you're in the property for 3 years and you want to get out, you're fine, and you just move on. So another nice thing is obviously since it's a tax assessment, commercial property owners, like the fact that it's off-balance sheet financing, so they have no more debt. Increased property values. When we underwrite the property, we have a processing center in Florida that does the processing on the asset, and we have an engineering firm locally that does the engineering on the project. So we make sure that the NOI is positive. Another piece of the program that's important in California is that we need to get lenders' acknowledgement. Okay, it's more of a protection than anything. That's not really required. But we do it. We think it's very useful. It gives the lenders a lot of comfort. And one of the most important parts of this is to provide them the engineering report. Okay. All right. Participating districts. There's really two kinds of programs out there. There's an exclusive and an owner arranged, okay? They both have advantages and disadvantages, so I'm not going to say one's better than the other. We have exclusives in Riverside County. San Bernardino County is a mandate that we won. We're going to start a statewide California program here in the not too distant future. We've been in front of Orange County, won the mandate, and then things kind of went sideways politically in Orange County. And that mandate basically went away, and now they're kind of regrouping and figuring out what to do. Orange County is very, very important. In Riverside County, we have, I'd say like 400 contractors, 400 to 500 contractors that have signed up for the program just in Riverside County. Okay, it's a lot of contractors. Well, they don't just do work in Riverside County. They do work all over the place, okay? So they do some in San Bernardino, they do some in Orange County, they do some in San Diego, LA. So, you know, one of the counties that is prolific in all of our conversations with most contractors is Orange County. And there's a reason for that. Valuations are very good here on properties. The economy is very strong here. So generally speaking, what happens is the property owners can qualify for a much larger project on their property. Okay, and so you know there's a very, very strong push to get into the Orange County area. San Diego County, we're in front of them right now on with regard to several initiatives. Another wonderful place. And then, like I said, we won the mandate in Ohio, and there's a little legislative issue going on there. But we also are working with other countries on their programs. So we're working in Canada to help them put together their legislation in Ontario. So they're coming out with PACE legislation. This is not new to Canada. They did this in Vancouver. It was a failure. So, but Ontario is doing it differently, and we're helping them with the legislation so that they understand kind of where they went wrong in Vancouver. And so we're working, in those areas as well, outside the U.S. Owner range models, Los Angeles, who is here, is an owner range model. What that means is nothing more than LA just said, listen, we're going to do all of the administrative of the program. We're going to give people access to this PACE assessment so they can finance their properties, but we're going to let financing entities compete against each other. And, as far as we're concerned, we love that because we think our solution long-term is going to be the best. Our rates are going to be the best. We'll be very, very competitive. So that's not a bad way to do it. And I think, you have your first project coming down the pipeline. So I just let you know that as well. Yep, absolutely. So we're also in front of the San Francisco program. I talked to Mr. Chen up there, been in front of them a bunch on their program and how that's going. So trying to, facilitate their efforts. I think you'll find that in the PACE community, there's probably 5 of us that finance this stuff. Okay, we all do it a little bit different. We all know what everybody's kind of idiosyncrasies and their little approaches are to it. There's enough space out there not to compete. I mean, we don't have to fight each other for states and projects. I mean, the space is so vast. Throughout the U.S. that that's a lot of times we end up collaborating on ideas. We meet frequently with David Hodgins on their program to talk to him about what's going on and what can be done, as well as other programs and other funding partners, actually, for that matter. So, all right, example of eligible improvements. The key to our eligibility is there's a couple restrictions, so I'll focus on the restrictions. We can't do public financing, so we can't do financing in, on municipalities, on school district projects, which typically are very large-scale projects. That's not our space. And we don't do it on new developments, so we can't go into a new, new commercial building. And we had a very large company come to us recently, and they basically said that they need to. They're building a couple of warehouses in San Bernardino. They want to put solar on it. They want to use PACE financing. And what they have to do is basically build out the project, get their occupancy certification, and then they're good. Then they can go into the program. We are, by and large, agnostic to technology. Okay? We don't care. Whatever works for you. We have about 60 million of our own product in the queue right now. And it's everything under the sun that you can imagine. There's lots of multiple, technology projects. Obviously, people try to get a quick bang for part of it, and then the long solar advantage over time. So we see everything under the sun. In terms of the properties that we have come in, I think it's about 60, Saga, correct me, 60% solar, roughly? 70% solar. So 70% solar than other stuff. Property types, the spectrum. I mean, there is no obvious candidate for asset classes, asset types. So, all right, program summary. Back to a point that was made earlier. I mean, the way this really works in the long term is to find something that's very scalable. Okay, we think one of the biggest problems in our research and kind of coming to the space originally was, first of all, it was bifurcated. It was either you can get project financing for $50, $100 million projects through JP Morgan and Wells Fargo and Hancock or wherever you want to go through. There's like 3 or 4 that are really competing for those large projects. Or you can go and get kind of small financing, or you can use your credit card, or you can try getting some really short-term financing, or do the lease option. I mean, you could do the lease option, but then, you have a bullet at the end, you don't own the equipment, you have those kind of issues. So one of the things that we said right out of the box is, we want to make sure that we can fill the gap across the spectrum, no matter what the sizing is, okay? And the second problem was that there's only certain, in the small space, sometimes the government agencies would come out with small programs that would promote certain technologies for a little bit of time. They'd run out of money, it'd be oversubscribed, everybody was upset, and at the end of the day, nothing would get done. So one thing about the way we set up the structure is that it's really, there is no limit to the financing capabilities of the investor community, frankly. There is none, okay? Scalability is there. We might make sustainability over time. We don't rely on any government subsidies, any programs, any kind of municipal, anything. If somebody wants to use a rebate, they can. If they don't have to, if it gets through the pipe. So we like that way of doing it. It's a very private sector kind of way of doing it. We have 25-year financing, which we talked about earlier. We have 7% rate on the 20-year right now, roughly. I think it's 540 on the 5-year. The 25 years, I think, is just under 8, so it's a little bit higher. So we have very quick approval process. We basically want to touch the consumer as few times as possible, so we don't get burnouts. In my experience on the residential side, the fewer touches, the fewer times you go back to them for docs, the more likely you'll get it done. So we try to touch them as few times as possible and do most of the work for them. Education is a really important part of the application process, and the contractors. We have workshops for the contractors to help them understand the product. So when they sit down with somebody and have this as an option, this is only one option to finance, it's not all options, that they can explain it correctly and articulately and know the asset. So that helps us out on that side as well. Another nice thing is, from the investor's point of view, the payments don't go to anybody but the contractor. Whoever did the work gets the check. And we have a trustee, so nobody else holds the money. Nobody holds the money but a trustee and the contractor. Investor, trustee, contractor, that's it. And nobody gets to touch it. I'll be very brief on these. Eligibility requirements, as you can imagine, property owner on record, no bankruptcies, current on their debts. I mean, the credit requirements are very de minimis. No lates on their property the last 3 years. Property eligibility. In the program in California, we have 20% of the property value, so the project can go up to 20% of the market value of the property. You can use assessment, you can use whatever you want for that. Debt service coverage 105, and you can't exceed 90% of the property value on the overall debt. This next section I'm going to totally skip over. This explains just our underwriting process. It looks a lot more complicated than it is, so it's basically a phone call. But it is very thorough, very comprehensive, behind the scenes, without the investor thinking about it. I'm sorry, the customer thinking about it. And that is what I have this point. I got to tell you that I'm, in this space, I've seen this space before. I'm very old, so I was around the 80s when the CMBS market started out. So back in the days when the commercial mortgage-backed security space started, they had a dilemma. They had a lot of projects coming down the pipeline, but they're handled like project finance. They're handled one at a time, very one-off. You had to do, every single project had to be reviewed. And it became so cumbersome as the markets grew back then that people were going, oh my God, what can we do to fix this? This is a nightmare. You know, we can't get this done because there's such a logjam of projects. So the commercial mortgage-backed security space came alive. Why don't we bundle them together and then assess them as a pool? As a consequence, they fix their problem, okay? I think PACE is at that point where you have these large, you know, everybody views the assets on a project finance basis, and it caused problems for a while. Now we've gotten to the stage where we feel like now it's going to be more iterative, more efficient, and a lot easier for the contractors and for the community, and promote energy efficiency. So that's it.